Well, welcome to the video. Today I just wanted to give everyone a little review of my CTX700. It's a really nice bike, and anybody thinking about buying one, there's really nothing wrong with them. They just didn't sell well. You can get them really cheap. This one is fully dressed. I have the touring seat, shad bags on it, hard cases, GPS. My wife wanted that shorty exhaust, so I put that on the other day. See, we got the engine guards and the highway pegs, and the rear suspension is adjustable. So if you want to increase the spring rate, you can adjust it. There's a couple lock nuts in there. It's pretty simple to do with a couple screwdrivers. The book says it's not adjustable, but it is. So when I load this thing up, when we go on our long trips, we want to have a little bit more spring rate to support the weight of all of our luggage. Also have the Madstad windshield. It's not cheap, and it works okay. I don't think it's the windshield's fault. With this bike, there seems to be a lot of turbulence that comes up around the forks. As you can see, this is like a ramp here, and the air just comes in here and goes right up and hits you right in the chest. If you don't, that's what this plate is for that they give you. I recommend if you buy one of these, always put that plate on. Just kind of deflects the air down a little bit so it doesn't hit you right in the chest. That's one thing I don't really like. So you get a lot of like wind buffeting from the turbulence around the forks. And I have tried to reinforce this. You know, I tried to make a triangle out of their L shape over here. As you can see, this one's not modified. And I just put a little tension on it. It does help a little bit, but it's still, you get this like vibration in the windshield. Then it starts vibrating your helmet. Now, I don't think there's a lot you can really do about that. It's just the way the forks are designed. But again, it's not that bad. I think if I played around a little bit more with the angle and the height of the windshield, I could get it a little bit better. But right now my wife rides this. You know, I rode this for probably 20,000 miles I put on it over the course of a couple years. And I wanted a bike that I could afford to ride even when times are tough. You know, it does really good on fuel. The engines are really well made. This is a dual clutch. This is the automatic. As you can see, there's no shift lever, no clutch lever. And we'll take it for a little ride here in a minute. Just wanted to show everybody these bags also. These are nice bags. They are big though, and they are wide. They are a bit wider than your mirrors, so you have to be cautious. You know, just be aware that the bags stick out further than your mirrors. And your foot peg will rub the ground before the bag will. So I know from experience they look really low to the ground, but they will not touch the ground. Your peg will rub on the pavement before your bag does. Let's just go over this side. It'll be a little bit easier to see. But they're really nice and reflective in the back. You know, you're very, very visible. But these were the best bags I could find to store all of my stuff. These are actually some of the nicest bags I've ever seen on a bike. You know, we've had FGRs, ST1300s, Concours 14s, Goldwings. I don't know if they're quite as good as a Goldwing, but they are one of the best. As you can see, they even have this little shelf here, so when you open the door, your stuff doesn't just fall out on the ground. You can strap it in real easy. So when you get to the room at night, these just pop right off. Just pull this lever up. Come off. That's simple. Let's see, there's a little latch here. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it's very, very simple. They just pop off. You can take your clothes, your luggage right into the room with you. Same with the top box. You just hit a button and it just pops right off. Then you just line up this bottom one. Make sure the latch is open, of course. Push down, click it in, and that's it. And they are on there. And they're rubber mounted so they don't rattle. Nothing on this bike rattles or vibrates or squeaks. And there are about 24,000 miles on it now. The valves were checked not too long ago, and they are like, they were perfect. They didn't need any adjustment over about 20,000 miles. I think we checked them about 18,000 miles. They needed no adjustment. Everything looked perfect. The engine was super clean. I do run full synthetic oil. Just make sure if you haven't read your owner's manual, that you run an oil that is not energy or resource conserving. There is something in those oils that is not good for a wet clutch. It could cause the clutches to slip a little and wear out. So don't put that type of oil in your bike. It is a chain drive. I wish it was a drive shaft, but again, for the price of this bike, it's not really a big deal. I did put a center stand on it just to make chain maintenance a little bit better when you're traveling. Brakes are really good. Tires are cheap. It's a very common size tire on this bike. All right, let's take it for a little ride. So like I said, this is an automatic, so there's no clutch, no shifter. You just have a neutral drive in sport mode. You can see on the light, we're in neutral. And there she goes. She always fires right up. But yeah, that engine was like spotless inside when I took it off to check the valves. Okay, so now all you do is press drive. Then it goes into drive mode. You hear a little click, you feel it a little. There's a little D and a number 1, shows you first gear. And that's it. And then after that, it's just like a scooter. Oh, and there is a parking brake here, because you can't leave it in gear when you're parked. So all you do is lift this up, and then you see a little parking brake light come on. And the bike it's definitely parked. So you just lift it up, press that button in, and let it go forward. Parking light goes off. That's it. Hopefully this exhaust pipe isn't too loud for the video, but it's not a bad sounding engine. The connectors on this old GPS are not the greatest, so it's turning on and off, so just ignore that for now. I'll have to mess with that when I get home. But this thing shifts super, super smooth. You barely feel it. The mirrors are good. These are like the universal mirror Honda just puts on all their bikes now. I think the Africa Twin has the same mirrors. The NC700 have the same mirrors. Hydraulic brakes, front and rear. Again, I wish they would have handled that wind coming up from your forks a little bit better. That can get annoying. This is a great bike though. Anybody who wants to learn how to ride but doesn't want to shift gears, this is great. It is definitely a motorcycle. People say, it's an automatic, it's a scooter. Nonsense. This is definitely a motorcycle. And I've toured all over the country on this thing. It is very reliable. People say that you can't shift it. You can. You can actually hit this button right up here by my index finger. Press that. Now we're in manual. So now I can just select the gear right here. That is neat. It's like a paddle shifter in a car. You just hit the upshift is a trigger on your index finger. The downshift is your thumb. And that's nice when you're going through the mountains or just riding slowly through town. You know, you're not constantly shifting. You know, you can just put it in automatic. You can also put it in sport mode if you're going up the side of a mountain around all little curves. You put it in sport mode, it lets the RPM stay up a little bit higher, so it never feels like you're lugging the engine or that it's turning too slow. Again, my wife loves this bike. She started out on a Honda Rebel 250, and finally one day I talked her into riding it. I almost had to twist her arm and throw her on there, and I jumped on her Rebel and just took off and forced her to follow me. Then after that, she wouldn't ride the Rebel anymore. She loved it. By the time we got home, she was throwing rocks at that Rebel. She wanted nothing to do with that bike anymore. So this is a great bike for a beginner. It's a very low center of gravity, very easy to ride, not intimidating at all. It's very nimble, very responsive. And this dual clutch system is amazing. Whoever programmed the gear shifts did a really good job. You know, somebody spent a lot of time programming that of when it shifts gears. The only thing I think they could have done a little bit better is when you get on the throttle, it doesn't want to downshift right away. It hesitates for a second or two. I wish it would downshift, you know, a little bit quicker. When you start going off a big long hill and you're only doing like 50 miles an hour or so, and it's trying to pull sixth gear, I wish it would, you know, as soon as you roll on the throttle, try to go up that hill, I wish it would downshift, you know, into fifth, just to let the engine spin a little bit freer, free everything up, instead of trying to pull high gear up that hill. But other than that, it's perfect. It does pretty good on fuel too. I think it'll do right around 60 miles to the gallon, I want to say, maybe a little bit more. It only has a 3-gallon fuel tank, and I think around 140 or so, a little over 100 miles, the gas light comes on. And I think when the gas light comes on, you have like 0.8 of a gallon left. But it has a very accurate fuel gauge. So when it starts to flash, I think the bottom bar will blink red. That's, you know, you're low on fuel. When it's solid red, that means you're almost empty. You have like 15 miles, I think, when that thing turns solid red. But it has a lot of nice features. It does have a tachometer, has a digital speedo, has your time, has 2 trip speedometers. You can also adjust the backlight, you know, how bright you want it. My father, he had a NC700, but he had the 6-speed manual. And that bike with the manual transmission, if you can shift gears, I recommend getting the manual. It just seemed like that bike had more power. I don't know why. It just seemed that way to me when I rode it. They are the same engine. You know, Honda had the NC700 first, then they kind of redesigned it to bring the seat height really low and made it more of like a cruiser style bike. but it really is an NC, and I think they put different forks on it. They changed some of the bends in the frame under the seat, relocated the fuel tank, airbox, things like that. But these engines are tough as nails. I don't think I would ever be able to wear this thing out, but I would trust this bike to take me anywhere. I've never had any problems with it at all. It's just worked flawlessly for the couple years and 24,000 miles I've put on it. You know, you don't see any particles in the oil from the clutches. They're not wearing. Now, my dad's NC had more clutch particles in the oil when we change oil than this does. So the computer is shifting much better than a human being could shift it. Yeah, this is nice not having to pull the clutch in all the time. You know, you just sit back, relax, enjoy the ride. Don't worry about it. You can't stall the engine. The computer is just taking over. One downside of having the automatic, though, is you know, in any emergency, your battery died or your starter failed, you cannot push start it. You know, like the manual transmission bikes, you can put it in gear, have somebody push you, get you rolling, and dump the clutch and give it some throttle, and you can get the engine to run. This, you cannot. Hopefully it's just a dead battery and you can get it jumped. But yeah, you are never going to be able to push start this one. So right now we're running about 56, 57 miles per hour, and the engine is spinning 3,000 RPM in high gear. And I have quite a bit of headwind too. I'd say it's about a 10 mile an hour headwind, but it's just cruising. It's not affecting it at all. Plenty of power. Definitely not a hot rod, but it has plenty of power. Sometimes I feel that Honda spins the engine a little too slow. You know, they upshift right away as soon as you take off. If you're in the normal drive mode, I mean, it's in 6th gear at about 40 miles per hour. I mean, it just upshift. You know, hopefully up here I'll be able to show you once we come to a stop that they have it programmed to run very efficiently, which is good if you're doing a lot of city driving. You don't want to wind up the engine all the time. You know, you want to keep it running slow. It burns less gas that way. When my wife was learning to ride, I went and I was at the Honda dealer and I picked up a CTX700. So I upgraded to that bike. So she got my old bike here and she loves it. One of the reasons I wanted to upgrade is that wind buffeting. It started to bother me after a while. You know, I tried a bunch of different things. Angling the windshield might help. This is the tallest windshield I could get from Madstad. And the small fuel tank. When you start running 70, 75 miles an hour down the freeway, I'm going to say it's maybe doing 45 miles to the gallon. 40 or 45. You know, at those speeds, you're loaded down with your clothes and your luggage, and you only have a 3-gallon fuel tank. Every time you stop, you got to get fuel. So I didn't really like that, especially I do a lot of riding by myself. If I run out of gas out in the middle of nowhere, especially at night, that could cause a bit of a problem. But I think that, what is that, Rotopax? They make something called the gas flask that holds, a gallon and a half, I think. I thought about getting one of those, but they're like $100 for a gas can. Nah, I just couldn't justify spending $100 on a gas can. I'm sure they're good, and I know they come with a lifetime warranty, but still, $100 for a gas can? I don't know. Maybe someday. It would be a nice thing to have, you know, peace of mind. Remember, you can just have I just signed my wife and I up for AAA for like the premier package because they're having some deal or something. Thought, well, this will be nice to have for her and I when we're touring. At least we can get a free tow. They can bring us some fuel, and that was only 140 bucks for both of us. And that's, you know, any vehicle, whether it's motorcycle, car, somebody else's car, as long as we're in the car, we're covered. So what, I mean, that's a better deal than spending $100 on a gas can. You might as well just have AAA for $40 more. But the engine doesn't burn any oil. I've never had to add oil on any of our trips. Like I said, this is a great engine. Very dependable, very durable. I don't know if it's as good as a Goldwing, but it seems really, really well made. You see now, 25 miles an hour, we're in 4th gear. 30, we're in 5th gear. Now we're accelerating kind of slowly. Now 41 miles an hour, we're in 6th gear. So if I were to get on the throttle more, it'll let the engine rev up higher before it shifts. But for normal riding, just keeping up with traffic, it shifts, you know, very quickly. It keeps the engine RPMs very low. Much lower than somebody driving a manual transmission would. You know, I think if I were shifting gears, I would not shift quite that early. And I don't think anybody would. Here's where Foxconn is coming in. About as far as your eye can see, all the way back from the interstate to where we cross the railroad tracks. This is where they're building the new Foxconn factory. Doesn't look like they've gotten much done though so far. If I were going to buy this bike again, I think I would buy the full fairing model though. I would not buy the naked model. I think with the full fairing model, you wouldn't get that wind buffeting or vibration from the forks. You know, you would get very smooth air. So if I were going to do it all over again, I would get the one with the fairing. And I don't know if I'd get an automatic again or not. It's nice. It works great. But the wiring harness on an automatic is far more complicated than the wiring harness on a standard transmission. So keep that in mind. You know, you're making things far more complicated and you're drawing more power from the charging system. So if you're somebody who wants to run a lot of accessories, I would definitely go with the standard transmission. I would not load up this little charging system on this little engine. Again, if you just want to run GPS, that works fine. I think heated grips, I don't think heated grips take much power. I think you could probably run GPS and heated grips. I wouldn't go much more than that though. These roads are really rough around this area, and it still rides pretty good. You know, it absorbs them pretty darn well. And the rear tire wears out pretty quickly. The front tire seems like it'll go a few seasons. I think you'll get 2 years out of the front tire, or roughly, you know, 2 rear tires to 1 front tire. You know, you'll wear out 2 rear tires before you're going to have to replace the front tire. Rear tires seem to only last about 8,000–9,000 miles before you have to replace them. Luckily, it's a common size. It's a cheap tire, like I said earlier. I have some hard compound touring tires from Shinko on here now. So I'm going to see how that works on the back. Hopefully that gives a little bit more life to it. I've always had really good luck with Shinko tires. I mount my tires myself, and I just use the balance beads in there. It's not difficult to do. If you've never done it before, watch some YouTube videos about it. It's not hard, and you'll save quite a bit of money, and it's worth it. Especially if you're like me and you ride a lot of miles and you go through 2 tires every year. You know, if you take it to a shop, they're going to want $100 to mount that tire. Sometimes even more than that. And I just use a tire changer from Harbor Freight. They have a motorcycle attachment for it, for motorcycle wheels. Then you have to get what they call the duck head and bolt that onto the rod, because the rod that it comes with works good for car wheels that are steel. If you try to use that on a aluminum or an alloy wheel, it'll just destroy it. I mean, it'll just, you know, you're using a steel rod and you're dragging it around the wheel, pulling the tire off the bead, and it will just destroy. You have to get the duck head if you want to do alloy wheels or motorcycle tires.